いらっしゃい。
Yukari bowed after Kyoko hailed her.
晩ご飯買ってきたの？
Kyoko pointed to the bag Yukari was carrying.
ええ、簡単にできるものばかりですけど。
はい、かしこまりました。
Yukari took a seat at the counter. She watched as Kyoko brewed her coffee.
何？
何かつまめるものはありますか？
夕飯前なのにいいの？かりんとうくらいしかないけれど、どうぞ。
ありがとうございます。
Yukari took one of the fried dough cakes that were piled atop her coffee saucer and popped it into her mouth. Sweet brown cane sugar slid across her tongue.
ねえ、ゆかりちゃん。
Kyoko addressed Yukari as the latter set down her steaming cup of coffee.
何でしょう？
ああ、うん。時坂くんに伝えてほしいことがあるの。明日、こっちに来てほしいって。
Kyoko took her time getting that all out, almost as if it was an uncomfortable topic.
ええ、構いませんが。
Though confused, Yukari just nodded. Perhaps she needs Reiji's opinion on something. Yukari pondered what that could be as she sipped her coffee, but ultimately ended up just as clueless as when she'd started. The sun had set by the time I'd finished my errands and returned home. Took off my coat and plopped down onto the sofa. Dealing with Roshiki had just been as taxing on my mind as I'd feared. Hell, I hadn't even been the one talking to him, and it still felt like I'd pulled several all-nighters in a row. I'd long since settled my score with him. Wouldn't have to see him ever again. In spite of that, though, the relief that knowledge should have brought me never came. Maybe it was because I'd feared he was going to act. If he was going to act, it'd be during his transfer to prison. While I'd never seen his holding cell arrangements, I could only imagine they kept him under heavy guard at the MPD. So if there'd ever been a golden opportunity to make a break for it, it'd be when he was out of the confines of his cell, and he surely knew that as well. However, I had no idea what we were supposed to do about it. The logical course of action would be to look out for any potential sympathizers of his, but who was to say if they could even make a move after he'd been isolated from the outside world for 2 years now? In any event, all I knew for sure was that I couldn't rule anything out where Rokushiki was involved. I wasn't even getting into how he'd made contact with Kaede Watanuki today. If it turned out that she actually was under his influence, that means some sort of exchange of information had happened during their conversation today. The interview was cut short after Rokushiki mentioned his transfer. Knowing him, he probably wouldn't have employed such a bald-faced tactic of passing on that info. No, he would have resorted to something more subtle that she and she alone would have picked up on. Otherwise, all he'd accomplished was beefing up his security detail for kicks. Or maybe he didn't plan on escaping at all and had simply been messing with us to get a good laugh. However, it was suicidally naive to believe such a thing. At any rate, I was sure he'd seize the chance to make his getaway in a heartbeat if his guard so much as decreased by a single officer. Unfortunately, the police's only real recourse against that was to watch him like a hawk during the transfer. There were 2 prisons in the vicinity. One of them, the Tokyo Detention Center, was also known as Sagamo Prison and was still being used as a penitentiary even after the GHQ occupation had ended. Though, from what I'd heard, it was supposed to revert to a detention center by this May. If that were the case, that would mean it was more likely that Rokushiki would be transferred to the detention center in Kosuge. If he were to stage an escape on the way from the MPD to Kosuge, where could it happen? I brought up a map of Tokyo in my head. The Sumida River, the bridge crossing the Arakawa floodway, maybe further up ahead in Senju. Those make good hiding spots for any of his allies to lie in wait. Which meant Rokushi's police escort was equally aware of that possibility, naturally. Thus, they'd probably cross a different bridge altogether to outmaneuver them. Sure is difficult to come up with any counter-strategies without knowing the actual date of the transfer. Rokushiki likely didn't have all that many sympathizers, if any. As such, I doubt they could wait forever. Oh, shit. My finger pressed the button. As such, I doubt they could wait forever for a police van they only knew would be passing through at some point within the next few days. Question is, what to do?
何がですか？
Yukari, go back to bed. It was only after I found myself squinting in the blinding flood of the lights that I realized I'd neglected to switch them on.
明かりもつけないで。考え事ですか？
Oh, Yukari just got home, huh? Yukari set a grocery bag on the floor.
これから夕飯の支度なのですが。
そうだな。
I didn't notice until she mentioned it, but my stomach started growling like a ravenous beast as soon as she brought dinner up.
少々お待ちくださいね。
Yukari headed for the kitchen.
ああ、お湯を沸かしてくれないか。茶が飲みたい。
わかりました。
I rose to my feet after Yukari responded. Afterward, I returned to my room and got changed. It was colder than Niflheim in there, no surprise, the brazier wasn't lit. Man, I'd kill for one of those electric heaters right about now, even a super tiny one. I hurried back into the relatively lukewarm living room before I froze to death. There I fired up the heater and warmed myself before it.
帰ってきたらすぐにつけておけばよろしかったのに。
Yukari emerged from the kitchen with a teacup in hand.
帰ってきた頃にはそこまで寒くなかったんだよ。と
Took a sip from the tea Yukari served me.
あ、そうでした。兄さん、
なんだ
用があるそうで、明日お店に来てほしいとおっしゃっていました。
店に
指定はされていなかったので、いつでもよろしいかと思います。
そうか。わかった。
I stepped away from the heater and lounged on the sofa.
それでは伝えましたよ。
Yukari left the kettle and a teapot behind as she sauntered back to the kitchen. What could Kyoko want with me? Whatever it was, my visit would probably have to wait until tomorrow evening. Assuming that was the day of Hiroshiki's transfer anyway. And then it was. Dun dun dun. Masuki visited Kichiki Hospital just before noon on Saturday. There were a few other patients around, leaving Masuki to assume the majority of the hospital's daily crowd must have had their appointments in the morning. He went inside and checked in. Fortunately, the wait wouldn't be long given that he had an appointment. As such, Masuki found a seat at a nearby bench and cooled his heels.
佐々木さん、どうぞ。
A few minutes later, Masuki entered the examination room after a nurse summoned him.
先日はすまなかったね。前もって連絡を入れてあげられればよかったのだが。
Kaede bowed as soon as he stepped
い
inside.
え、構いませんよ。
とまあ簡単に許してしまうようでは、ずる賢い連中につけ込まれるから注意した方がいい。
いきなり何なんですか？
Kaede shrugged and smirked. Seemed even she didn't really know why she'd say that.
いや何？ちょっと悪いやつと会ってきたものだからね。
悪いやつ。
Masuki would have been lying if she hadn't piqued his interest.
六式誠だよ。
あったんですか？
興味があったものだからね。
Can people really meet a prisoner like Orochi simply by expressing curiosity? No, you need connections in the right places. Someone like...
時坂さんですか？
ご明察だ。いろいろと制限はかけられたが、とりあえず会うことはできた。
Kaede shrugged hard.
惨敗。
正直、あれには関わるべきではなかったよ。警察にはいらぬ疑いをかけられるし。
八木沼警視ですよね。
Suspecting others was practically that man's forte.
あちらは疑うのが仕事だろうから仕方ないわね。
I'm sure any police officer worth their salt would suspect you if you were acting like this. Not that Masuki dared voice that thought, of course.
しかし、君はよくあれの治療を受けてまともでいられたね。
まともだったんですかね。
十分まともさ。何せまだこちらの世界に踏みとどまれている。
Personally, Masuki didn't know if he could say in good faith that he hadn't at least towed the line Orochi had crossed.
まあ、十分な治療。
それがされていたらどうなっていたんでしょうかね。
そんなの、あれにしかわからんさ。あれは君のことを優秀な素材と言い放ったからね。
It was likely the looming specter of Masuki's past as Ayata Hinagami that had given Orochi that impression. Had Orochi never been arrested, he may very well have molded Masuki to his own personal puppet given enough time. Orochi hadn't been involved with the Lord Hina murders, regardless of how closely they resembled his own serial killings.
また何か余計な考え事をしているの？
いや、それは。
Kaede had hit the nail on the head so accurately that Masuki couldn't find it in him to refute that.
何も考えていない人間はただの足だが、考えすぎてもろくなことはないよ。
それは分かっています。
There was one flaw Masuki knew he had. It was his tendency to think in increasingly negative circles.
気楽にしたまえよ。そうだ、君の雇い主にも伝えておこうか。
勘弁してください。
I get enough verbal abuse from him already for not using it, thank you very much.
それは冗談だとして。どうだい？ 最近は落ち着いてきているんじゃないのかね。
Man, with you here, I'm always feeling stable.
そうですかね。
Rigid, even.
自分ではよくわかりません。
よくわからないということは症状が気にならなくなっているということさ。いい兆候だ。
ではもう診察は受けなくてもいいんですか？
Shut up. You want to see the doctor. Asuki wasted no time getting to that question.
もうしばらくは来てもらうことになるだろうな。
はあ。
Fucking coward. Quit trying to run away from the sexy psychiatrist. Honestly, he didn't feel these sessions were really helping. But they weren't harming him either, so he saw no good reason to turn her down.
それでは今日はこれで終了だ。また来週。少し間隔は短くなるが、今まで
Oh,
通り
the
水曜
sooner
日
the
に来
better,
てもらえ
ma'am.
るかな。
Yes.
わかりました。
いらっしゃい。
Kyoko greeted me the same way as usual when I entered Moonworld. No, wait. Is it just me, or does it sound a bit uncomfortable?
コーヒー頼むわ。
However, I pretended not to notice and took a seat at the counter. We went through the motions of our typical routine, as per usual. Everything afterward was also per routine. Just sat back and watched Kyoko grind the coffee beans before she started brewing up her standard cup of joe. However, it felt like she was keeping her back to me longer than usual. Is she? I didn't dare speak first, since it didn't feel like the right time or place for it. Deep down, I had an inkling of what she wanted to discuss. Kyoko poured a cup of coffee before finally facing me again.
あ、
I blew on the piping hot coffee. All I could do was wait for her to break the ice herself. No, that's wrong. I should be steering the conversation in that direction, shouldn't I?
どうかしたのか。
We looked into each other's eyes, trying to probe out the other.
いえ、なんでもないのよ。
Kyoko shook her head. I didn't believe her for a second, of course, but still decided it best not to press further.
今日もお仕事？
まあな。警視庁に行ったんだが、拉致が開かなくてな。
We just kept pussyfooting around each other, making casual conversation all the
魚
while.
住くんに頼めばどうかしら。
Kyoko raised an
あ
eyebrow.
いつの上役がひときわ面倒なやつだからな。
Took a sip of my coffee once I finished explaining the situation.
おかわりいる？
Kyoko held aloft her coffee pot.
そうだな。
Quickly chugged down whatever I still had left. Before long, Kyoko topped me off with some aromatic coffee straight from the pot. I stared at it for a
あ
bit,
のね、時坂くん。
till Kyoko suddenly addressed me. I looked up. Kyoko stared straight back into my eyes, her visage hardened by resolve.
話したいことがあるのだけど。
Don't fade to black. What did they talk about? No, don't do this to me.
人生相談の時間です。本日の相談者の女性は将来を誓い合った
You clearly listened to the radio after she finished prepping dinner.
双子の妹と
Reiji still wasn't home yet.
決まったことが
Odd,
許せない
didn't say he would be out this late. What could they be talking
今まで
about?
ずっと
That wasn't anything pleasant, judging from how Kyoko had looked when she'd given Yukari the message. That was why Yukari hadn't been able to so much as wager a guess as to why Kyoko had wanted to see her brother. However, perhaps it only made sense that Reiji would be late if it was a serious conversation. Yukari consulted her hunger to decide if she should eat now or wait for her brother. When suddenly she heard the front door open. Oh, that must be him. Yukari got up and decided to put out the finishing touches on dinner.
ただいま。
Reiji trudged into the living
お
room.
帰りなさいませ。すぐ晩ご飯のご用意をしますね。
ああ、
Yukari entered the kitchen as she watched Reiji plop down to the sofa after delivering that terse reply. There, she fired up the stove and reheated a pot of curry. Yukari kept an eye on the fire as she surreptitiously stole a look at Reiji. He looked as if he'd had the life drained out of him. What in the world did he and Kyoko discuss? I don't know, but you better fill me in. It was then that she realized she'd forgotten to stir the curry. Thus, she frantically turned back to the pot and stirred it with a ladle to keep it from burning. Need to stay focused. Yukari took the lid off the rice cooker with renewed vigor. She returned to the living room once everything was
お
finished.
待たせいたしました。
ああ。
Reiji's head was clearly in the clouds.
どうかなさったのですか？
いや、なんでもない。いただきます。
Reiji craned his head downward and picked up a spoon. Yukari didn't buy that for even a second, but she knew her brother wouldn't tell her the truth even if she kept prodding him. Besides, he at least looked far better than he had during that depressive spell that had hit him at the end of January. She didn't see the hollow shell that had been that he'd been back then. Either it was more like he was thinking hard about something. Thus, she was sure he'd be just
カ
fine.
レーはまだたくさんありますから。
そんなに食えねえよ。
Reiji finally cracked a smile at that. Though Yukari had no idea what had happened to her brother, she knew all she could do for him was act like nothing was amiss. Rosemi dropped by CID Section 1 on Sunday morning. Officially, he didn't return to duty until tomorrow. However, he decided to come in a day early so he'd be ready to answer the call of duty whenever it came knocking.
管理官殿は
To his surprise, though, Yaginuma's desk was empty.
会議があるってんで、
Coworker Rosemi had known from before he'd been reassigned promptly answered his question.
警部補殿はそっちの席だ。よろしくな、班長殿。おう。
Rosemi didn't know why, but there was something embarrassing about being referred to by his rank. It felt too foreign and stuffy for his tastes. His desk, sitting at the head of all the others, was bare as a crop field after a locust swarm. Rosemi removed his coat, hung it on the chair, and took his seat. It wasn't that far from where he'd been seated just 2 years ago, yet he still felt awkward as could be. Come to think of it, I haven't been given my new badge yet either. I felt like a fraud searching that gallery without one, permission or no. There wasn't anything on his desk yet. That said, he didn't expect to ever see much there besides reports given how frequently he'd be out in the field.
俺がいなかった間に何か変わったことはあるのか。
Rosemi turned to face his coworker.
傘下の片山が結婚したな。あとは井上のやつが所轄に飛ばされたって話だ。んなことはどうでもいいんだよ。何もやり方は変わってないってのでいいんだな。そう変わってたまるか。
Well, that's good. That's a hell of a load off my
ああ、
shoulders.
そうだ、上住。独身寮の若い連中から文句が出てるぞ。警部補殿がいると千釣りもままなりませんってな。俺が知ったこっちゃねえよ。
Rosemi's coworker curved his lips to elude
お
smirk.
前もいい年なんだからよ。嫁さんもらって家でも建てちまえよ。んなことは別に考えちゃいねえよ。
Rosemi found himself shouting before he had time to stop himself.
非番のやつがうるさいぞ。
Rosemi turned to face the entrance and the source of that familiar voice.
お久しぶりです、柳沼警視。
Rosemi rose to his feet, stood up tall, clicked his heels together, and saluted.
勤務は明日からのはずだが、
すぐ動けるようにしておこうと思いまして。
心がけだけは立派だな。
Yaginuma took his seat, piling a stack of papers on his desk.
だったら手伝ってくれ。車両仕様の申請書3部。明日から1週間の予定だ。
Yaginuma held an unfilled document out to Rosemi.
6式。
その質問には答えられない。
了解。
The response had been as good as any confirmation. Rosemi returned to his desk and started filling out the form. The vehicles in question were obsidian black Toyopet Crowns. I'm going with the black and white squad cars, huh? Though they had their own police vans, Yaginuma probably wanted to go incognito.
管理官。
Rosemi handed the completed applications to Yaginuma.
ご苦労。
Yaginuma added the applications to his pile of paperwork without even checking them.
ああ、それと魚住。明日から出勤だろうが、今週中は退勤後も宿直室で待機している。
は。
Rosemi knew protesting wouldn't do him any good. He'd been planning to speak with realtors after work since he still didn't have a place of his own, but that would just have to wait. Rosemi couldn't blame Yaginuma though. It was his own fault for not picking an apartment even after he'd been back a week. Guess I'm just gonna have to put off until things ain't so charged around here. Seriously, you'd think the Emperor was visiting with all the high alert they got us on. Though perhaps that was only natural, since it was Rokshiki they were escorting. There could be rats anywhere. So it only made sense that the men in charge would be as cautious as submarine radar technicians in enemy waters. Went to Ueno in the morning. My objective was to look into the credible rumor regarding Goroshiki's transfer that Kaede Watanuki had heard at the psychiatrist drinking party. Specifically, I'd gone there to find out how it had gotten started. Fortunately, talking to those who'd attended ultimately only affirmed what she had speculated. That was to say that the rumor had just sprung up on its own with no real source. Shouldn't have been a surprise in hindsight. Gorosiki had been a psychiatrist himself, so it was only natural that he'd come up in a gathering of those in the same profession. Though that said, I couldn't deny the possibility that they were hoodwinking me. Regardless, I left the hospital I'd made my inquiries at after concluding my business, and walked to the station, ignoring my car sitting in the parking lot. Not that I had a good reason for doing so. I was just stuck on what happened last night. I thought we'd had a mutual understanding of how our relationship worked. I didn't blame her for closing the book on us, mind. Better to end it now than be stuck in a purely selfish relationship that was going nowhere fast after all. Still, her words refused to leave me in spite of that.
俺がパラノイアにとらわれたまま。
I was perfectly aware of that, of course. It still had me in its claws even though she died. That was because there was another girl out there I had to find. What the hell am I even doing? Shouldn't I be tearing the country apart in search of her right now? Am I seriously putting my faith in a kidnapper? And a murderer at that? That must have been crazy. This was a man who performed inhuman experiments on children numerous times. As such, there wasn't a single reason to trust he wouldn't hurt her. Or worse. The only one I could come up with was they'd sworn an oath to Nanako and she gave him the baby. That was kind of my assumption as well. But who was to say he'd keep his word? To Nanako? I'd believe it. Suddenly a familiar mop of blonde hair caught my eye. Stella?
Stella.
Stella turned to face me, her face flushed scarlet for some reason.
誰？
Stella cocked her
い
head.
や、時坂だが。
レイジだ。
At the end, for every time she forgot who I was, I'd be driving around in something much hipper than that hunk of junk Wozomi dumped on me.
これから仕事か？
Something's not right. I know Stella's always been kind of a special case, but never this bad.
ステラ、ちょっといいか？
Pressed my hand against Stella's forehead.
熱があるんじゃないか？
A rush of heat surged through my hand.
大丈夫。
Stella shook her head.
お仕事。
With that, she backed away from me and resumed her trek toward the art museum, only to wobble back and forth like the town drunk.
病院に行った方がいいんじゃないのか？
Got Stella and helped her stay on her feet.
どこもお休みだった。
まあ、今日は日曜だからな。
だからお仕事。
I escorted Stella over to the art museum. There was no way in hell I could have left her be when she was so ill.
朽木病院なら診察してくれるかもな。
Though their doctors and I were nothing more than acquaintances, I suspect they'd humor me.
病院？
その状態で働いても周りに迷惑をかけるだけだろ。
大丈夫。迷惑ならいつも。
No, it's okay. I always cause trouble. They expect it from me. That's actually a huge cause for worry.
とにかく美術館の職員に事情を話して。
そうする。
車を近くまで持ってくるから、それで病院に行くぞ。
わかった。
I went to get the car after I watched Stella wobble into the museum. It wasn't long after I pulled up to the side of the museum that Stella came back out. Set off after helping her into the passenger seat, taking care to drive slower than usual.
具合が悪くなったらすぐに言えよ。
Fortunately, there weren't many big trucks around, probably because it was a Sunday. We headed for Nakano as I watched out for trams that passed by every now and then.
ねえ、レイジ。
Stella abruptly broke her silence when we stopped at a light near Shinjuku.
車用意したのか？
手貸して。
Stella took my right hand off the gear stick and pressed it to her
レ
forehead.
イジの手、冷たくて気持ちいいから。
My hand blazed against Stella's feverish skin. She felt even warmer than earlier.
ステラ、信号が変わる。
However, she refused to let go. That said, I was in first gear, so I didn't really need it to drive. Parked at Kichiki Hospital. It was practically deserted, typical for a Sunday. Didn't even see Fumiya Kichiki's car around. Would have been swell if we could have seen him, given he was a physician by trade, but alas. Oh well, not like there's anyone else I can turn to. Took Stella to the hospital to find a doctor. The reception desk was unmanned, as one would expect on the weekend. Come on, there's gotta be someone here.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'll happily look at you, but I don't think you're quite who I'm looking for. She, however, would not have been my first choice.
どうしたね？また別の女を引き連れて。
いろいろと言いたいことはありますが、まず彼女が熱を出しているようなので。
Yeah, I felt Stella's forehead.
確かに熱があるようだね。
Yep,
そ
that's
こ
a
に座
fever.
っているといい。
She gestured to a bench.
今当直の医師を呼んでこよう。なんで？
No,
軽減そう
you're
な顔
hot.
して。
Kathy frowned when she saw me gaping at her, as though she were Lazarus risen from the
い
dead.
や、まるで普通の医者だなと思いまして。
とても失敬なやつだな、君は。 患者の前でふざけるはずがないだろ。
Kaede turned around and strutted down the hall, leaving me to take a seat next to Stella. Well, no, I didn't think you were the hospital's court jester or anything, but surely you realize how surreal this must look to me, right?
レイジ
Hand.
まあ
I offered Stella my right hand, which she quickly guided to her forehead. Stella took a breath before leaning against my shoulder. Ah, for the love of... What is with me today?
お待たせしました。
Looked up to find the baffled Kahara guarding us.
お邪魔でしたか？
いえそんなことはありませんがステラ
Stella opened her eyes and got up.
申し訳ありませんが、当直は私だけでして、簡単な診察とお薬をお出しすることしかできませんが。はい。
Stella nodded feebly.
では、こちらへどうぞ。
Kahara took Stella into an examination room. Well, looks like I finally got some time to kick back and relax until Kaede shows back up. Is that seriously what I just thought? The hell am I even doing with my day? Stella emerged from the examination room a short while later.
大丈夫か
お注射打った。
脳取りしなかったか
してない。
Stella inflated her cheeks and sat next to me after I teased her.
軽い風邪のようですから、お薬を処方しておきますね。一日安静にしていれば。
Kahara came out a few seconds later and carefully instructed Stella.
はい。
Stella nodded without putting up a fuss. Ma'am? Since when can Stella be that formal outside of work? Or has she always been this way and I've just never witnessed it before?
どうする帰るか
Turned to Stella after Kahara left us.
もう少し休
Stella took my hand into her own and set it on her forehead, just like before. She didn't feel any cooler, but then again, medicine didn't typically kick in that fast.
レイジは
今はいいさ
I couldn't very well leave her when she was still hot as a hair, after all.
ありがとう。
Stella laid her head atop my shoulder.
後で家まで送っていくぞどこに住んでるんだ
It was only then that I realized I didn't know a thing about our living arrangements.
内緒。
Afraid I don't know a district called Secret in Tokyo.
送り狼？
Oh, Michiru. Turned around, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest in surprise. I love how that's Michiru's default sprite now. It's her holding the rabbit over her head. It's just so cute.
みちるかよ
Michiru stared right back at me with a countenance colored with curiosity.
誰？
ああそういや初めてか知り合いの娘さんで茅原みちるでいいんだよな
Michiru nodded. Wait, Stella and Michiru together? Oh God, what horrors have I wrought into this world by putting these two in the same room? Michiru, completely oblivious to the spine-tingling dread I felt, took a seat next to Stella.
誰？ステラ。マリス・ステラ。そう。
Never before had I met two people who were on identical wavelengths and yet worlds apart at the same time.
風？みたい。近くにいない方がいい。おじさんは？
Michiru pointed to me for some reason.
おじさんは大丈夫。そう。
I'm sorry, exactly what was there to see in any part of that conversation?
おじさん？
改めて確認しなくてもいいから
Slid my hand down her face and closed her eyes. Stella nodded, did as I asked.
ねえ、おじさん。
Last time, don't call me, but... You know what? Forget it. I quit. This is just karma catching up to me for what I subjected Suzuriko to, isn't it? If Michiru is the ghost of Suzuriko come back to haunt you, I couldn't welcome Michiru with any more open arms.
今度はなんだ
悲しいことあった？
You're gonna have to be more specific than that, girl. Oh. Means very recently, as in his conversation with Kyoko. How was it that a girl with a father so dense never failed to see right through me?
悲しくはないさ
I recalled the previous night. Kyoko and I had come to a mutual agreement to put an end to our relationship then and there. Sure, it was a bit depressing, but I wasn't sad. Or at least I shouldn't have been.
本当？
It just scrutinized me with her eye.
嘘をつく必要がないからね
そう。
Mitra turned to Stella as though she'd lost all interest in me.
どうした？
この人も悲しい。
さあね。
Stella wasn't exactly an open book. Though honestly, I could definitely see her being upset about the theft and counterfeits that recently plagued her workplace.
悲しいことある。
Go back to bed. Stella chimed in, much to my surprise.
何があったんだ？
お昼にお汁粉食べたかった。
I love these dorks. That really isn't my problem.
お昼にお汁粉。
I love that sprite of me today. You know what? Fuck it. I gotta take a screenshot of that. I love that sprite for Michira. Michira gulped, looked up at the clock, then faced me.
なんだよ。
駅前に甘味どころがある。
First I've heard of it.
甘いもの食べたら風邪も治る。
I love these idiots. How the hell are these two such experts at tag teaming me when they'd only just met?
買ってくればいいんだろう。
Though I'd need to ask if it was okay to let a hospitalized patient have some first. Little did I know that going to Kohara for permission would result in her roping me into getting some soup for the nurses on duty, too. Reiji. Oh shit, Mario Day. Monday morning had arrived. I went out into the living room after waking up a little later than usual. It was then I noticed a small bag on the table. Must be Yukari's.
おい、ゆかり。
However, no sooner had I called her name than I realized Yukari would be long gone by this time of day. So she actually forgot something, huh? Guess even Yukari can screw up every once in a while. What if she needs it for school? I untied the bag and opened it. Inside was some kind of box bundled in a handkerchief. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. Momentarily entertained the possibility that she made it for me, but that was highly unlikely. After all, the handkerchief had pictures of bugs on it. Guess I'll swing by the academy and make sure she gets it. I wanted to spend the afternoon starving after all. It was a lot warmer than it had been weeks ago. It was still chilly in the shade. I got in the car and fired up the engine. Then I set the lunchbox in the passenger seat and took off. Kichijoji Station came into view. Normally I didn't pass by there when driving to Oba Girls Academy. I wanted to avoid the bumper-to-bumper traffic jams on Naomi Highway and Itsukaichi Avenue. Should probably take Inakashira Street. However, my thoughts faded away after I spotted a familiar face on the sidewalk while I was circling the station's roundabout. Hey, isn't that...
Sato-san.
Oh shit, long time no see. I rolled down my window and hailed her.
おはようございます。
I am about decked out in the Oba Girls Academy school code.
もう卒業式は終わったんじゃないのかい？
Though for all I knew, the school could have regulated that students wear their uniforms even after graduation. There was one school I wouldn't pass to demand that. It was Oba.
体を動かしたくて学院の剣道場には行っているんです。進学後も続けて通いますから、防具はそのまま置いていますし。
ああ、それで制服なのか。
来月からは形が変わりますから、少しだけ名残惜しいです。
Oh yeah, she could have got a new uniform too when she graduated, didn't she?
ところで時坂先生。
Emma grabbed the edge of my door and leaned forward as if she was about to crawl inside.
なんだ？
そろそろしてくれてもいいのではないですか。
Go on patrol.
何を
obviously.
だい？
探偵助手のことです。私はまだやれますから。
Oh, that. I was relieved it had all been a misunderstanding. It didn't make me feel better knowing she was still chasing after that dream.
せめて学院を卒業して社会的にも自分の行動に責任が持てるようになってからだな。
社会的に独立していても自分の行動に責任を持てない人はたくさんいます。
That wasn't the issue here, like, at all.
事件に関わりたいのだったら探偵よりも警察の方がいいぞ。辞めた俺が言えた義理じゃないが給料もいい。
なるほど、そういう考え方もできますね。
Aiba nodded over and over. Truth be told, I'd only said that because I didn't want to have the guilt on my hands for something to happen to her under my wing.
そうなったら私は先生にお仕事を斡旋すればいいんですね。
それは助かるな。ああ、そうだ。助かるついでに頼まれてくれないかな。
何でしょうか。
俺の代わりにこれをゆかりに届けてくれないか。
I showed the small bag to Ayame.
お弁当ですか。
ああ、もちろん学院までは送るぞ。
Though I was by no means a stranger to Oba Girls Academy, I still felt uncomfortable going into an all-girls school to deliver a lunchbox.
足腰を鍛えたいので送ってもらわなくても結構なのですが。
Ayame reached out a hand to grab the
あ
lunchbox.
りがとう。それ
I forked the bag over.
それではまた。
She bowed before taking off. Well, that saved me a trip. Now what? Glanced over toward Kichijoji Shopping District. No, I can't face her yet. Still too soon. It was with that thought I decided to drop off the car at home and get back to work. Today marked Ozumi's first official day back on the job. As said, it really didn't feel that way to him, apart from the bit where the section chief had formally welcomed him back and presented him with his new badge. Ozumi took a seat at his desk. The section chief had ordered him to work under Yaginuma as if he were the man's valet or something. However, the esteemed police superintendent in question wasn't present. If Ozumi had to guess, he was probably in a meeting about Makoto Rokushiki's transfer to prison. Without the man to order him around, all Ozumi could do was wait. So with nothing better to do, he read up on the recent string of homicides he'd miss out on. Though only identified by a serial number for the time being, it would probably come to be known as the Exile of Paradise killings. Unsurprisingly, Reiji had been involved with the case. Ozumi already knew the general details and never hurt to be as informed as possible. Thus he went over all the facts, though he found it odd that there were still so many unanswered questions even after the perp had been caught.
おやまあ、お久しぶりなお方がおりますな。
Ozumi turned around to face the owner of that familiar drawl.
どうも、夏目さん。
ああ、今日からこっちに復帰でしたか。
それも仕事ですから。ところで何か用事ですか。
ああ、そうでした。その件でちょいとな。
Natsume pointed to the documents Ozumi had been reading.
読んどるっていうことは、内容は大体知ってはるんですやろ。
いや、まだ読み始めたばかりですから。
しゃあないな。ヤギの間もおらんことですし。
Natsume grabbed the nearest chair and made herself at home without even asking if someone was using it.
今日持ってきたのは他でもなく、未だ身元不明のままの仏藩の解剖記録なんです。
Ooh.
最初に見つかった仏ですか。
Ozumi had at least read the info concerning her.
犯人宅で天使の姿にされてたお人です。犯人の知人なんは間違いないんですけど、黙秘してましてな。
仏から何か分かったんですか。
にゃ、なんもですわ。犯人と顔つきも似とりましたさかい。兄弟か親族だと思いますけどな。
Natsume set the autopsy report atop the rest of the case files.
なんせ犯人の前園正犯が無戸籍者でしてな。
黙秘しているのには理由がありそうだな。レイジのやつはそれについて何か言ってましたか。
無理に聞き出す必要はないと言いとりましたわ。それを聞かない代わりに他の証言はするという約束みたいですね。
Though it hadn't exactly been a plea bargain, it was close enough.
同時期に間宮心臓の贋作事件がありましたからな。
それでいいんですかね。
うちは捜査員とちゃいますし、ヤギ沼藩が認めたんでしたらええんちゃいます。
僕は別に認めたつもりはありませんがね。
おや、ヤギ沼藩。
Yaginuma arrived just then with a stack of papers tucked under his arm.
おはようございます。先ほどの話ですが、黙秘権は尊重しますが、聞き出してはいけないという約束事もないんですよ。
Yaginuma pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose.
だったら聞き出してきちゃくれませんかね。
すでに送検されている以上、こちらには関係のないことだ。
Yaginuma strutted off to his desk, elaborating no further.
なんや、ピリピリしてますな。
やることが多すぎるんでしょうよ。
Rokushi's transfer was a top secret matter. Though Ozumi didn't know exactly how many there were in the know, he figured the less who knew, the better, and included Natsume.
ヤギ沼管理官。
Ozumi rose to his feet and headed for Yaginuma's desk.
なんだ。
自分は何をしていればいいのでしょうか。
Ozumi stood at absolute attention. As much as the pompous upstart rubbed him the wrong way, Yaganuma was still his direct superior.
待機だ。用があればこちらから呼ぶ。
了解しました。
Ozumi saluted and returned to his desk.
なんや、戻って早々窓際ですかいな。
だったら楽なんですがね。
Ozumi deflected Natsume's ribbing before sitting back down at his desk. Things are gonna get busy soon enough. I got a feeling shit's really gonna hit the fan once they do. That's whether that was sooner or later. Figured he should get as much rest as possible so he'd be ready to act at the drop of a hat. Oh yeah, shit's gonna hit the fan. Don't you worry about that. Casually dropped by Inukashira Park. The pond gleamed with a vermilion hue, compliments of the impending sunset. Oh, let me guess, you're gonna go to that bench where you first met Toko? You know, come to think of it. It was also early March when I first met her here, wasn't it? Yep, I knew that's exactly where this was going. It's already been 2 years since then. 2 short, yet long years. Circled the park as my mind got lost in a labyrinth of memories. She and I had only known each other for a little over a month. Yeah, which makes everything so much weirder. Genuinely. But despite that, her talents were still lodged deep in my heart. No signs of letting go anytime soon. And it makes zero fucking sense. This man, prior to meeting Toko, was still struggling to get over the death of his fiancée, who he had also, you know, he was going to have a child with before, you know, Rokushiki got a hold of her. But it's like his fiance, who I assumed he had known for at least several years at that point, maybe at least a couple, hopefully. I mean, seeing on how he latched onto Toko in just a month, maybe he only knew his actual fiance for like a year, but even then, that's much more than Toko had. But just within a month, all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, let's just ever forget my previous fiance ever existed. She's not important anymore. Like, yeah, I get it. Toko is still kind of at the heart of, like, there's an unsolved mystery here, right? Like, after they got Rokushiki, the mystery of what happened to his fiance was solved, so it wasn't, like, present in his mind. But the fact that, like, she's never on his mind anymore, his heart never aches that she's gone anymore. Because this teenager, this depressed teenager that he knew for a month, somehow really pulled him in. God, I don't understand you, Reiji. That's the thing. Reiji can get freaky nasty with Natsume. It's always an option. Refuses to do it. He had a good thing going with Kyoko. If he would have been able to let go of he would have been able to just let go of that, his 1 month tryst with a teenager, like, genuinely could have had something there. But no, he's obsessed with this teenager for no good goddamn reason. I mean, not no good goddamn reason. Like, the kid's still out there, but even with the baby still being out there, it's like, I don't know. I've ranted about this so many times prior. All I can do at this point is repeat myself, but God, it's the one aspect of this entire fucking series that just drives me up a fucking wall. I sat on a bench and contemplated the pond. A pair of ducks huddled together, trying to preserve whatever warmth they could as they eagerly awaited the coming of spring. They're probably parent and child, if I had to guess. Chizuru? I looked up. Yeah.
Kuchiki-san deshita ka?
And bowed once I saw that Chizuru Kuchiki was before me.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely don't want to say what's on your mind around her. Lord knows she won't give a shit. I forced a smile. And again, maybe whatever Stella had was contagious. Couldn't very well tell her what had been on my mind. Yup. However, she looked a bit sad, so she must have had at least harbored a good guess. What do I do? All we've ever talked about is her.
そうだ。Fumiya-san はお元気ですか? いえ、先日お電話をいただいたのですが、どこか元気がないように思えたので。
先月の末に体調を崩したことはありましたけれど、それ以降は特に何もありませんが。
Chizuru cocked her head.
そうでしたか。ではこちらの勘違いだったのかもしれませんね。
Won't be the first or last time someone's mood got misinterpreted over the phone. Not much was sure.
兄の体調は私がしっかりと見ています。
Yeah, I'm sure you have. I'm
何の
sure
心
you
配もい
have.
りませんよ。
Chizuru smiled.
そうですか。
That was all I could say to that. Unless Fumi is having an affair with Kaede. Random thought was like, he sounded drained when I talked to him over the phone. Was he drained because he had had some intense moment with Kaede? And therefore, as payment for getting his rocks off, he agreed to talk to Reiji on her behalf? Mayhaps? I don't know. Kaede doesn't seem like the type to sleep around to get what she wants, but I could see it happening. Who takes up more room in her heart? Fumiya or as if that's even a fucking question. Bro, come on. The answer was so obvious I didn't even need to ponder it. Good. I'm glad that was a fucking rhetorical question for you. I was like, are you kidding me? At her own memorial service, she just said, yeah, technically I was her adoptive mother, but honestly, I don't really care. Guys, I gotta be honest, I don't feel anything right now, so, just, do what y'all need to do and wrap this up and get out of here. Chizuru sucks, dude. Doko probably wouldn't have fretted about her origin so much if Chizuru had shown her even a fraction of the love she held for her brother. Oh, God, exactly. If Chizuru was even semi-decent. See, it's all Chizuru's fault at the end of the day. In the Shell Part 1, who was the real villain? It was Chizuru. When it comes to Toko, anyway. It was Chizuru. If Chizuru had actually been willing to step up, hey. Like, I get it. Toko was kinda forced on them, if I remember correctly. Because the original director, Kichiki, was like, hey, you two, since y'all are gonna be nasties over there, at least raise this kid, right? So I get it that the daughter was really kind of pushed onto them. And so it wasn't like Chizuru sought out a child and then didn't care for it, but also it's just, ugh, suck. And of course in the Shell Part 2, who was one of our big villains? It was Chizuru. Because if you remember, the very first time they, Fumiya wasn't into it. He, like, fought against it. He was, like, trying to push away and resist. Like, that first scene, like, obviously the background knowledge of what we know about those characters made that scene already incredibly awkward. But the fact that Fumiya clearly wasn't a fan just makes everything so much worse. And the fact that it's continued on into this. Because, like, if we check our notes, right? Check the notes. We look at Fumiya. It just says Chizuru's brother and the director of the hospital. But if I remember correctly, if we check Chizuru's, loves her brother Fumiya as more than a sibling. She's the one who clearly has an obsession, right? So much so that Reiji feels the need to write it down in his notebook, right? To where he's just like, bro, clearly there's something more here. Whereas with Fumiya, it's just like, yeah, it's a brother. Clearly and it's obvious just from the events of the Shell Part 1, he genuinely did care for Toko. Like, that one day she like ran away from home for a couple days or whatever, and Fumiya was like looking haggard. He was like running around looking for her and whatnot, and obviously it seemed like Chizuru didn't really give a shit. Fumiya's a good guy. He's in a really fucked situation, but he's a good guy. You, on the other hand, you suck shit. I hate you. Also, we got some updates here. Yukiko. Seems Dr. Watanuki is treating her. Okay. Gyoko? We're more than friends, but less than a couple. But she decided to close the book on that. Yeah, and whose fault is that, idiot? Can still count on him to have my back. Ah, we love to see that. That's a nice update to put in someone's your summary. Akto, holy Jesus. Has not said a word to them. Rumors are saw him for the first time in a while, but he hasn't changed one bit. Okay. Seems meeting Rokshiki took a lot out of her. Okay. Made counterfeits. Alright, good to know. Jane Doe initially mistaken for Samazono. Identity is unknown since Sei Maizono refuses to divulge it. And Ayamina has an entry. Yukari's Yukari's underclassman? But she graduated. What? Has helped me out a lot. Honestly, I think she'd be a much better assistant than Masaki. I love how he feels the need to include that. He's like, I wish she could be my assistant. I don't want to because she's my sister's friend, and I know my sister would never forgive me if something happened. But I feel like she'd be much more capable than Masaki has ever been. But also, Yukari's underclassman? But she graduated. But underclassman. But she's graduated. But she's underclassman. Huh. I don't know if I ever connected those dots. I don't know if that ever really sunk in that she was an underclassman, as in younger than Yukari. Huh. Huh. Alright, anyway. I couldn't color out on that. Even if I did, it wouldn't do either of us any good. True. Like, you both know it's the case. The thing is, you are upset at Chizuru for not stepping up to be a mother. Chizuru doesn't care that she never did. She never cared in the first place. The girl died and she didn't care. If anything, she was probably upset that she stole attention away from Fumiya. Yeah, go flick it to your brother, you weird bitch. Chizuru bowed and strolled away. I'd better get going too.